Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Mama Genius Hub podcast. I am so excited to bring Jackie to you guys today because, again, this is all about diving into our genius. Well, her genius is all about speaking. So we can talk about the public speaking aspect for those of you that want to be speakers, but she also works with kids and that speaking that we can do between mother daughter with our kids, but also getting our kids out there speaking too. She's got two of my kids out there speaking on Summit. So there is so much goodness in today. So I'm just going to start by going ahead and reading her bio for all of you, and then we're going to dive right in. So don't tell anyone. Silence Jackie at the age of 9. 15 years later, she saved another child by speaking up. Known as the International Conversational Coach, Jackie inspires clients to break their silence and become victorious over trauma. Just take that in, ladies. Today, she's a founder and executive director of the Speak, Feed, Lead project, which has empowered hundreds of children, including mine, teens, and 2 adults with confidence, courageous voices shared on global stages, competitions, podcasts, and books. Jackie is a 2015 semifinalist in the World Champion of Public Speaking, a TEDx speaker, and a best-selling author of 5 books on topics ranging from leadership, healing, communication, and parenting, and the co-host of the Life Mastery radio show with Todd and Jackie. I am so excited to have you here, Jackie. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It is delightful to be here, and I am so impressed with all that you're doing for the moms.
Oh, thank you. So I just want to dive right in and let's go to what makes you want to help others speak out.
Wow. Well, I was in an abusive home as a kid, and it was a chronic situation. I was abused by an older brother and a family friend, and I was told not to tell. I was taught to lie. And it really silenced me in many ways in that I couldn't feel comfortable in social situations. I was always afraid I might tell something that I wasn't supposed to, and it really held me back and silenced me. And it wasn't until I was an adult woman, having kept that secret for my whole life up to that point, when another child was in danger. My brother got married and had a baby girl. And I was the only one who knew the danger that was lurking. And for months and months, I was in an emotional crisis over, should I break my silence? What will happen if I do? Will my husband still love me? Will people think I'm crazy? Maybe they'll try to take my kids away. I really was stuck. And I also knew, though, that if I were to take my life, which one of the options I was thinking of, and no one knew to protect my niece, they wouldn't also know to protect my kids if it became necessary. So I finally decided that I loved my kids more than I hated myself, and I broke the silence. And it wasn't until I did that I realized, gosh, I have something important to say. I have words that are worthy of being heard. And today I want to make sure that kids know that they know that they have life experiences that are inspirational to other people. And so we help them to gain confidence to speak up. We help them to develop those stories that are uniquely theirs and help them to deliver it with power on any kinds of stages. We have kids that are developing their own podcasts. They're being authors in books. They are on stages giving keynote speeches, and they're even giving TEDx speeches. And so I don't have any data to prove the whys and the hows, but I can tell you, I'm very certain that the kids we work with are not the kids who are going to take their lives, because they understand their own value and the worth of their voice. And they also see the value of other people because they listen to their stories and have empathy for them. So it's a lot more than just public speaking skills. And I'm just grateful that I've been able to come full circle in that and unsilence the voices of kids.
That is, I don't know, I'm speechless right now because it's just so powerful in terms of how we do hide our voice. And I want to say, especially as women, like we feel like we have to suppress that even more. And why I think that's so powerful that you're bringing that voice out of kids. I know you also work with adults, but it's really just seeing the value in each one of us and that beauty that we all have. And that's why I want to do this podcast. I feel moms really put themselves down, and their kids aren't going to see that role model that they truly are unless they're showing them. I think this is such a great way to do that. So let's break down for the moms out there. What are some ways, like tips for them to start unlocking that voice within them?
For the kids?
Either way, however you want to take it.
Okay, well, we typically start with the real basics of how do you have an effective conversation? Because I was having a lot of moms come to me and saying, why won't my kid talk with me? If I ask him how his day was, he answers with fine or good or you know?
Oh, I've never been in that situation.
Yeah.
Ever.
And so I started to think, well, maybe that's the important place to start, because if we can at least get kids talking to their parents, then the people who love them the most are going to be there to support them for the next steps that are coming for them. So we teach the kids the 5 rules of effective conversation, and they're really easy to learn. They're easy to remember and easy to apply. And when they start applying these rules, we ask them to first use it in their families, and we see a huge dynamic shift in the communication style of the family, even when it's just a 10-year-old child or a 15-year-old teenager that is starting to communicate better. The whole family is affected by it in a positive way. And it really changes their confidence level. So they get better grades because they're no longer afraid to raise their hand in class if they don't understand something that's being taught. They make friends so much easier, and they're better friends. They're the right kinds of friends in most cases, or at least more often, because they just understand what it means to develop those relationships through curiosity and then asking the right types of questions and learning how to listen. So that's where we start. And once they do that, those 5 rules are really easy to translate to an on-stage speaking format as well, because an audience is just another person that you're talking to, essentially.
Well, I love that in terms of how you also bring up the idea of friendship and the right friends, because I think a lot of times we get stuck in that, even as moms or women as well, too, with the friends we choose. And really, that is part of the communication process, is really who do we spend our energy and time on. And I love that that's part of this process. Can you share the rules with us?
Absolutely. I'd be delighted to. So rule number 1 is to address the other person by name. So if you're going to be starting a conversation with someone, it's important that you say their name or their title, doctor, ma'am, or sir, if you don't know their name. But that alone will get you the attention that you want when you're starting to talk with someone. And at the same time, it will acknowledge that person, that you know them, you know their name, and you're honoring them by using it. So it seems pretty basic, but it's a very important step.
Well, I want to, before you go on the next one, I want to say, I do notice, sometimes when I'm talking to someone, all of a sudden, I cannot remember their name. And you know what? I've taken the point of just stopping at that point naturally in the conversation, but then re-asking, and it just changes the conversation. Oh my God, yeah, I forgot what yours was too. And then it just creates that personal share, because I do think it is so important that we do know what each other's names are, but it is so easy to let it go. But don't be afraid to re-ask it, because it just changes the vibe when you're putting the effort out to remember it.
Yes. Most people recognize that their name's not always going to be remembered. And we teach the kids that too, that, well, if you don't know someone's name, or if you're meeting someone for the first time, you initiate the conversation by saying, hi, my name's Jackie. I know we've met before, or it's nice to meet you. Can you tell me what your name is? Or something like that. And again, when you honor someone by asking their name or using their name, they may not consciously realize that it's affecting them positively, but it truly is. Dale Carnegie, in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, tells us that our individual names are the most beautiful word in any language. So anyone who hears their own name, for them, it is the most beautiful word in the English language. So anyway, that's the first rule. Second rule then is to make eye contact with that person. And as much as possible, keep that eye contact during the conversation. In other words, Don't be distracted by things going on around you. When you're with someone, be present with them. I don't know about you, Michelle, but I've been in conversations with people where they've asked me a question, I'm answering it, and they are looking past me or to the side of me to see, oh, who just came in the room, or they're on their phone, hello, and they're texting someone else. And I got to tell you, it makes me feel less than. And so I always tell my students, why would you want to make someone feel less than if you don't like feeling that way? So you have the power to, just by looking at someone, to really help them to feel special. So that is the second rule. I'm not advocating stare downs, but as much as possible, look at the person and focus on them. Let them know that you are focusing on them while they're speaking.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
So the other thing is, again, yeah, when someone's in front of you, it's that thought in your head, like we are a lot of times when that FOMO and like looking around and seeing but realize, just think about the fact that this person in front of you for a reason.
Yeah.
And really put that intention into and see, what can I actually learn from this person? Why is this person in front of me? When we have that question, that curiosity, and all of a sudden the rest of the room just fades away and you're able to give them that full attention. I don't know. Have you heard about the looking at the left eye?
No.
So I actually learned this in a women's circle. We actually got into two circles and we had to do a song where we went around the room looking at each other in the eye. And the reason they said to just look at their left eye is it cuts down your fear center when you're looking, like you're still getting that idea of like survival in you, but it cuts down that if you're only looking at the one space. I forgot the exact neurology of what it does,
Yeah.
but it makes it easier to keep that eye contact with them. It lowers your need to like that fear and even looking around.
Yeah.
Is if you're only, and it has to be the left eye, but I forget exactly the brain thing, but that's a good tip for the kids as well.
Yeah.
Is just focus on that left eye. And no one knows that you're doing that, but it helps your brain process it better.
Interesting. Because otherwise your eyes might be darting back and forth between the two eyes, and that can be a little distracting when you're talking to somebody too. So
exactly.
Great tip. Thank you.
I'm dying to hear number 3 now.
Okay. So number 3 then is, again, somewhat elementary, but it's, you got to ask questions. And a conversation isn't a conversation until you ask questions, but it is important to ask questions that are going to evoke a conversation. For instance, when your child comes home from school, Mom, and maybe you're in another room and you hear them come through the door and you say, "How was your day, honey?" Okay. The child most likely has been trained that you're not necessarily asking them to really want to go deep dive into how their day went. It's sort of a courtesy question. So you're going to get the typical response, which is fine, good,
I love the facial expressions. You go with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that has just become a rote question enough that our kids know it really doesn't have any meat behind it. So I always encourage different types of questions so that your child knows you really want to sincerely know. For instance, instead of asking, "How was your day?" you might say, "Hey, Junior, welcome home. What do you think has been the best part of your day so far? Or what was the worst part of your day? Or who did you get to eat lunch with today? Or how did you do on your spelling test?" Or something that will be not as trivial, right? Not as usual, but it's going to evoke a conversation. And that's the key, is you want to ask a question that you know is going to make them think for a second in order to answer it. Okay. So that's the third rule. And the fourth rule is hand in hand with that. And then after you've asked a question and they're answering it, you've got to listen. And I teach the kids to listen for key words that are being said. For instance, I tell them, listen for a noun or listen for an emotion. So going back to my example of, who did you have lunch with today? If you were to ask your child that question, and they answered, "I got to eat with my best friend, Joe." All right. Now, a couple of key words that Mom could gather up there is lunch, Joe, best friend. And the word best could also be considered as an emotion word because it identifies or describes something positive in a feeling, right? So your response is to use one of those words back to them and ask them another question. So you might say, "Oh, you got to eat with Joe again? You really like Joe, don't you? What is it about Joe that you really like?" And now you've led them down this road to hear, what motivates them in friendship? What's so good about Joe? How does Joe make this child feel? Or you could have said, "Well, what did you and Joe have for lunch today?" So you could use one of those key words to reply back to
Mhm.
them. Now, this is going to do a couple of things. And again, this isn't always on a conscious level with the person that you're talking to. They're not going to go, "Wow, she used one of my words back," but they are going to feel listened to. They're going to feel understood because you are literally using their own words, and it's just going to help that conversation to move forward. When my students have been given an assignment to start applying these rules, and they go into the kitchen at night when either mom or dad are cooking, and they address them by name and say, "Hey, Dad, what delicious meal are you making tonight?" Dad will reply with, "Oh, well, thanks for the compliment. It's this and this and this." And the kids will come back and say, "I had a really great conversation with my mom or my dad," like for the first time, because I knew they were listening to me and I was listening to them, and we ended up laughing a lot. So the kids tell me this works.
I love
And
that so much because it's just our human desire to be seen and heard, and
oh yeah,
so really putting that into practice and doing it vice versa. But I love that you're
yeah,
having the kids explore with that and part
yes,
of that discovery, and it's such a skill to learn early on that will
it
serve them
is.
for life.
It is. And I tell them that the main reason to have a conversation with someone is either to learn something new about them or something interesting. And in fact, I often give them an assignment to go have a conversation with somebody, even someone that you know, but find something new about them and bring it back to the rest of us in class with a story related to it. So if you're going to ask your dad, "What kind of music did you listen to in high school?" and your dad tells you about the kind of music, now we want to hear a story, because they're going to keep asking questions like, "Well, why did you ever see that band in concert? Well, what happened that night when you saw them in concert? Did you go with friends?" If you are listening for those key words, you're going to be able to continue this conversation, and you're going to come back with some juicy information in a story form that you can share with other people. And they enjoy doing that too, because they have to really seek for that information. So the fifth rule kind of leads into that then, because the fifth rule isn't necessarily a rule, it's more of a philosophy, and it's not just related to conversation, but it's basically everything that you do, because it's not about you. That's the fifth rule, is it's not about you. So when you are having conversations with people and you're making them feel special in your presence and you are present with them, it's you're making sure that they're the ones being focused on. They're the ones that are the most important. And by doing that, you're building trust, you're building rapport, and that person is going to like you. That person is going to feel comfortable with you, and that's why you wanted to make it about them and not about you. That means sometimes we have to repress some of the exciting news that we have to tell until they ask us back, "So what's happening with you?" And then we can tell our good news. And sometimes that can be really hard to do. But my students see the big difference that it makes when they just use that philosophy about everything. A friend talks bad about them. Well, it's not about you. You need to go find out what's happening with that friend. Why are they angry with you? What happened? Why would they say such a thing? Or the teacher doesn't, my teacher doesn't like me. Okay, well, it's not about you. So find out why you'd feel that way. Go talk to your teacher, and when they start to apply that philosophy to other things, they begin to understand a lot more. And again, they build confidence because they start conversations to find the answers to things.
I love that because it really isn't about you, because if someone's affected by you, you're usually a mirror of something that's bothering them about themselves or whatever it
Exactly.
is.
Yeah.
And so it really isn't. I love that so much, but I never thought of putting it in those words. I'm going to start using that all the time now, because even in my mind though, like when you're feeling like just bad about someone else or something, or how you're
Yeah.
being treated, it's just like reminding yourself it's not about you, and ask questions about what's going on with them, because again, opening up that line of communication will help change that dynamic and that energy between you, and instead of just holding it and holding a grudge or whatever you're going to do, thinking, well, they don't like me. I'm going to have that conversation with Liam about his math teacher.
Yeah. Well, in some of the deepest, darkest challenges of my life, when I feel like crawling under a rock and not coming back again, when I think about, well, it's not about me, what can I go do to help somebody else? That's how I've gotten out of those funks. And so again, by applying that philosophy to just about anything, it helps you get a different perspective. It's not about you, it's about the other person. Let's go figure this out. Let me go help somebody and get it off of me.
And honestly, yeah, when you're in those dark places, the best thing to do is to go do, but even not necessarily with the person, but even just go do something for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you're just, it like lifts you up when you putting that energy into other people and change, then you forgot
right
whatever was bothering you in the first place.
Yeah, because I think it's been said that if we were all sitting around a table and we wrote down our problems on a piece of paper, then we all threw the piece of paper in the center of the table, we'd probably want our own problem back. Because if we started pulling out other people's problems and go, no, I don't want that one, I don't want that one, we'd probably most likely take our own problems back. So it gives you the perspective that, I might be sad about something, but somebody else always has it worse than I do. So again, it's not about me, it's about helping somebody else through that situation for them. So
I love that too. And I want to circle back to one other thing that you were talking about, like being, sometimes we worry so much in conversation and we're worrying about being interesting to the person in front of us. Mm-hmm. I love the phrase I heard, instead of trying to be interesting, be interested in that person. And when we really put forth, and like you said, paying attention to those key words and asking questions back to them, you're going to learn so much more and have that conversation with them and make that connection, which is what we're really trying to do, is have deeper connections with people. So, and especially with Connecting Mamas, why we're even doing this. And I love that so much. It's just a reminder, all of you out there, to really put that effort in to ask more questions. Instead of worrying about what you're going to say next, ask another question.
Right. Well, Dale Carnegie said that you can make more friends in 2 months by being interested in them than you can in 2 years by trying to get them interested in you. Yes. And when kids hear that, they go, oh, because everybody's been the new kid, right, at some time. And we feel like, if you're like me, you want to feel like you're going to impress people and you got to show them how really cool you are. But in reality, if you were just to walk up to someone and start a conversation, hey, I'm new here, my name's Jackie, what's your name? That's going to help you make friends way faster than waiting for people to approach you, because they just generally don't.
I love it. It's such an easy way. Just again with the names, starting with names. Names are so key, making sure you're learning new names, especially being the new kid or the new mom in the situation or the new group, Such just a great tip right there. So we've talked a little bit about the conversation stuff. I want to go into, before we run out of time, just give a little bit of tips for those moms out there that want to become speakers. What are some tips that you can give them on where to start with that process?
Well, I'll go there, but I also want to show them how easy it is to take those 5 rules to a stage situation.
Ooh,
okay.
Yes.
Address the other person by name. When you are on a stage speaking, you need to know who your audience is. And you can't obviously address everybody by name if you've got 100 or 1,000 people in your audience, but you need to be able to know what is their commonality here. Why are they there as an audience member, and address them in some way. Hello, welcome dog groomers, or welcome moms, use something that addresses them. Secondly, making eye contact. So when you are on stage, you want to make eye contact with the people on the first, second, or third rows of your presentation, and not scan the audience, but actually spend a few seconds with a few people at a time telling your part of the story to that person. And you're going to make some deep connections. So eye contact is important even when you're speaking. Asking questions. Well, when you're talking on a stage, it's more often than not rhetorical questions to gain a little bit more information about your audience, such as, how many of you like pepperoni on your pizza? Right? And by raising your hand when you're asking it, you're giving them the indication that you want them to raise their hand. But depending upon what your content is about, you can get a lot of information by asking a question like that in a rhetorical sense to get to know your audience better before you start talking. So the same rule applies. And then when listening for keywords, that's rule number 4. On stage, your role as a speaker, again, is to know your audience enough to use words that are relevant to them and that they're going to connect with. If you're talking to an audience of moms, some of those words would be kids, they would be schools, they would be, self-care, those types of phrases that moms are going to connect with. So those are the key words in that rule.
Mm.
And then the fifth rule, it's not about you. Well, as a speaker, you always have to give your audience a gift. Yes, we want to hear your story. Your personal experiences are important and they're inspirational. They need to be included. However, you always need to make it relevant to your audience somehow and give them the gift of seeing, this is what I learned from this experience, and these are the mistakes I made. Hopefully by my story, you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. So that's the way that you can make it about them. Okay.
That's amazing. It just sums it like right up and gives you just like those tips and really putting that eye contact into those first and having that as part of the story. Cause then you're actually talking to that one person rather than the whole audiences too.
Well, and Michelle, you and I are online. So when you're with an audience online, making eye contact means that you're not looking at the video. You're actually looking at the camera,
which is what I've always been doing.
On your device. Yes. So that's something new, a new dynamic to that we've had to learn and practice because of the pandemic when we all went online. So when you are speaking in an online meeting, when you are speaking, you're looking at the camera on your device. When you're listening to someone else, of course, you can look at their video or the slides that they're showing. But when you're speaking, you need to look at the camera because that will feel to the audience as though you're talking directly to each individual person.
Thank you. I need a reminder on that one because I need to work on that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So where would a mom start then who wants to speak? What's a couple tips for them before we run out of time?
Well, a lot of people feel like, I don't know what I would speak about. I've had some interesting experiences, stories, but where do I get started? So I typically encourage them to ask themselves some questions. One, what are your greatest accomplishments? This is often hard for women and moms to consider because we often put ourselves down. But if you can think about 3 things that you've done that you're proud of, they don't have to be like major awards or anything like that, but it's best if there's something long-term, like a goal set and met. Maybe you lost 10 pounds in the last 2 months or something like that. Whatever you're really proud of, that's something to start identifying. What are the 3 greatest accomplishments for myself? Okay. And then I want you to think about moments of crisis that you've been in that you handled well. And if you could think of 3 examples of that, when, the sink was flooding water all over your kitchen because you didn't know how to turn it off. What did you do? Did you call somebody? Did you clean it up yourself? Did you figure out how to turn the water off? Something that you did in a crisis situation that resolved it faster than it could have been. And think about those times when you did that. We all have them as moms with kids. There's always crisis moments. And then the third part of that is, now look at all of those maybe 6 experiences that you've got on a piece of paper. And what is the commonality there? Was there a certain trait that you used or a characteristic? Was there a value that you applied? Was there a similar person there with you in each of those situations? Or did you turn on some sort of knowledge or something that you had that helped you get through that? And by doing that, now you've got a way to give yourself credit, and you can see the way that I conquer challenges is through these things. And now you can set this path for your future. And you've got some amazing stories now that you could tell to inspire other people. Now, look on the other side of that too. So you want to list 3 of your greatest failures. And what I mean by failures is just a time when you felt you didn't meet your own expectations. This is also good because we learn or we inspire other people when they can learn from our mistakes and our vulnerability. So as a speaker, you kind of want to get to the point where you feel okay sharing your vulnerabilities and showing some of your not so great side, right? So by writing down 3 of your greatest failures, there's some experiences there that are going to make great stories to an audience. And then again, a moment of crisis that you didn't handle very well. Come up with 3 examples, if you can, of those moments of crisis. So now you've got, again, another 6 stories perhaps, or 6 experiences. Now take the commonality of all of those. in what ways did you fail? What was present in every situation there that caused you to not be successful in your endeavors? Now you've got, on both sides, you've got the reasons that you succeeded and likely the reasons that you failed. Now you've got some great content ready to put together a message that is going to show your failures, but it's also going to show the ways that you overcome some of your challenges, and what an inspirational speech that will be for anybody. So that's the way to start. That's the way to start.
But I love that. I mean, it really does come down to our stories, because that's how we learn, is through storytelling. I mean, when you think about the great teachers or their inspirational things, it's through what's happened to them. And so it's just bringing that out of ourselves as well, because we have it in there. It's just we've locked it down. And so it's trying to figure out how to unlock it.
Yes.
And I love, and going, and if you're struggling with that, but that's something you want to do, that's finding the community then to help you unlock it and shape it, because that's what this is all about, is find that genius in you and how you want to express that to the world, because we need more moms out there doing this.
Yes. But we go through the same thing with the kids. We help the kids to craft their keynote speeches in these same ways, because when you look at both your accomplishments and your failures, you begin to see your value system. You begin to explore, well, why do I think honesty is the best policy? Well, it's because of this experience. Why do I believe that determination helps me succeed? Well, because you've got examples of being determined and never giving up that allowed you to have what you wanted. And so that's how you have the stories that are going to inspire other people, is through what you've learned and how you've turned those into values that are now inspirational.
Well, I hope those of you out here are getting ideas for yourselves and your kids and how to get those messages out. And so we're running a little bit out of time, but we're going to go in and ask Jackie our 5 questions. Here we go. Number 1, what is your favorite book or resource that has such a significant impact on your journey as a mama?
Oh, my journey as a mom. I read a book it was several years ago now. It was by Dr. Bernie Siegel, and it was called Love, Medicine, and Miracles. Mm-hmm. And his book talked about how our emotions play into our health, our physical health. And that when we are feeling down, or when we're feeling shame or unforgiving toward other people, it begins to affect our health. And this was read during a time when I was healing from my abuse. And I realized how really true his words were. And it helped me to understand that when I was feeling low energy or I had a headache, it was likely because of something that I was also emotionally experiencing. Mm-hmm. And when I could find that emotion that was not serving me, it more often than not helped the physical ailment to go away. So as a mom, you always want to be at your best, and you want to be able to give your kids all that you can, and you have your off days, right? But that book certainly helped me to realize that there's a cause to the way that I'm feeling, and I just need to go in and be a little detective and figure that out so I could be a better mom.
I love that. I love how you put the word detective in there, because it's not a blame or shame.
No,
this needed there. It's just, let's figure out what's going on here. And right. Love that approach to it, and just helping each other. Like, we don't need to shame ourselves anymore. We just need to figure out what is going on and what do I want to do about it? Yeah. And just be open to that. Number 2 for us, let's go. What is a family tradition or ritual that brings joy and connection to your household?
Oh, you know what? We used to, when our kids were little, I have 2 grown children now and 4 grandchildren. And when they were little, and we didn't have a whole lot of money, we would take them on what we called mini zoo trips. And that meant to pet stores. We would take the kids to pet stores where often they had puppies, they had kittens, or they had lizards or hamsters or snakes or fish and things like that. And my kids grew up loving animals. They've always had dogs in their home. Our daughter has chickens and ducks and cats and snakes and you name it. And we instilled in them a love for nature and a love for animals just by these little mini zoo trips. It didn't cost us any money, but they were responsible pet owners from early on, because they would so often pick out a pet that they wanted, and we taught them how to be responsible for that. And I don't know if it was tradition, but we did that quite frequently. And it was fun. It was fun, free Saturday morning activity.
Well, I'm not sure how free it was if you kept getting all these animals.
That's true. I never have added up the cost of all of that.
Well, worth it, but it just was like.
That's right.
I love it though. It's such a great idea. Like, it's funny because my husband took the girls on back on one point, and then they're like, they were gone forever. I was like, "Where'd you guys go?" We were like, "We're at PetSmart."
Yeah, I know. It's an easy way to make a kid happy, I think.
It really is. So much to see and do, and you can say no.
That's
We're
right.
just looking today.
We're just looking. Yeah, you can say that going in. We're just looking.
Well, that kind of leads us into number 3, where I want to open up the conversation. You're probably one of the best people to do, and you've actually already heard this question in one of our meetings, but coming to the question of how are you? And again, I'm calling out moms as busy, but we've done this identification to ourselves. So how do we change it when we say, how are you? And I'm so busy, blah, blah, blah. And so do we change the question? Do we work on the answering? You're probably one of the great people to ask.
So let me see if I understand this. The question is, and rather than asking, how are you? What's a better way to actually open up someone else's idea of conversation and let them have a heartfelt with you? That's really great. I would ask a fellow mom, what's the best part of the day? You know, what's the best part of your day today? And oftentimes, especially with new moms, you say, well, I got to take a shower right before noon. Or I actually got dressed today. That's the best part. Or I got to sit down and actually have breakfast without, being up 3 or 4 times. So then you can start to understand how people are feeling. And I think one of the more important parts of listening to answers is you start to learn what motivates people. And I think this is really vital to moms for their kids, because when you understand what motivates your kids and even what demotivates them, now when it comes to asking them to help out with things or to study harder or to do their homework, when you know what motivates them, now you can provide the right incentives that matches that motivational pool for them. And I think the same thing goes with friends. Is we've all had those friends who've had health issues, maybe where they were going to have surgeries, or after they've had a baby, and you want to be able to help them out, but you're not quite sure what you can do. Well, if you know the friend well enough beforehand, you'll have a better idea of what you can do to serve them. Although a meal is always a nice thing, right? For most of those situations, taking a meal over is always a nice thing. But knowing what motivates people is helpful so that you can serve them in a more appropriate way. So those are the types of questions I think I would ask is, what's the best part of your day? Or how much sleep are you getting? Is there anything I can, would you like to go to lunch today? I think that would be a great question to ask somebody too, is, would you like to go out to lunch today? My treat. That would be a fun question. And I'd like to hear that question more often. Because again,
next time I'm in Seattle.
Yeah. Because that means you're going to give somebody a gift of your time. And I think that's
exactly. I love that. And I think just the more that we're opening up and just having different ways, I've been catching myself though, because I keep just asking the question, how are you? Like, it's just like out of my mouth before I even like realize it.
Yeah.
And I'm like into conversation with them, like, what just happened? I did it again. I did it again tonight.
Yes.
But I'm trying to catch it. I think the more that they are such habitual, some of these things in us. And it's like, what do you want to catch? What do you want to change, or however you want to do it? But these are just things that I'm noticing in me that I want to work on.
Yeah.
So number 4 for you, describe what the word genius means to you, and how do you feel when you are in your genius zone?
Well, genius to me does not necessarily mean knowledgeable or intelligence, which I think is probably the Oxford Dictionary, definition of it. But for me, genius is more like wisdom. Genius is knowing what you have to offer and then finding a way to do that within your wheelhouse. So, for instance, it took me a long time to find my voice. And I always knew that if I lived through the abuse of my youth, that I would be a strong person. I really didn't know what that meant. But when I was able to forgive my abuser and say those 3 words, I forgive you, to him, sincerely meaning it, I found my genius. I found that my voice could not only save a life like it did with my niece, but it healed me, and it actually allowed my abuser to change his life, because until I forgave him, he couldn't change. And so I've always felt that my genius was helping people see theirs and helping people to understand the value of their voice. And so to bring it back home, genius to me is seeing the value in others and then helping them to see that in themselves. That's wisdom, it's experience, and it's compassion, all rolled into the same thing. That's genius.
All I have to say is wow. It just really like sums it up in terms of just how you related that. And I'm yeah, I'm working on that right now, getting my voice back right now. But it just love the way that you said that in terms of bringing it back to figuring out the voice in them, but the part about them seeing themselves. Because I think
Mhm.
that's the hard part is it's so much easier to see it in someone else than
Yeah.
it is for you to admit it that that is in you. And I love that you added that part into it because that's so vital that we do that, especially as moms, because if we do give ourselves credits for the things that we were really good at. And it's so hard to receive that. And I just want to make that clear that we're capable, that we have that in us. And I want the moms to receive that because there's so much goodness in them.
Oh yeah. And you know what? This is the most important job of your whole life. And I will tell you now, because I have 4 grandchildren, that your role as parent never ends. Your role as mom never ends. It just changes. It morphs into different types of relationships. I mean, my daughter is 40 years old. And so we have a much different relationship than we did when she was 4. And yet I'm still her mom, and I will always be her parent. And so those relationships have to be good all the way through, right? And
Yes.
so helping your child to see what their genius in is one of the most important things you can do for your kids.
Which actually just leads us right into 5 is how do you encourage your child or children to explore new skills or passions and live in their genius?
Yeah. We really let our kids to do what they wanted to when they had a desire to try something. Our son, from the time he was 2, loved all kinds of balls, baseballs, footballs, soccer balls, volleyballs, anything. I mean, his second birthday, I think he just asked for a ball, right? And so he was really athletic. And we let him try any sport he wanted. And he did track, and he did pole vaulting, he did wrestling, he did football, he, everything. And he kind of honed in on those things that he enjoyed the most. Eventually it was skiing. And now he teaches ski lessons at a resort, every winter. And so we allowed him to just do what he wanted to do. And we allowed him time to perfect those things. Our daughter, on the other hand, was born to live on the stage. I mean, her first word was hi. And so she was always, yeah, she was always very social. She's had this sort of activist mindset. And so she was always just willing to put herself out there to help other people. And she has a very extensive resume on the stage, and she still performs on the stage. She has a Linda Ronstadt tribute band that is rated the best in the country, and she travels around the country performing as Linda Ronstadt. And so we allowed her to try that out, and we took her to auditions and performances and you name it. And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time, but that's when your child finds their genius, you do as much as you can to help them to expand on that.
I love that. So true. Well, we're pretty much close to it. So what I would like to do is just whatever is your final tidbit for speaking to our audience, and then also make sure you share how they can get a hold of you and your free gift that you have for them.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say, mamas, thank you. Thank you for what you do for your children, because your children interact with my children, and your kindness to them is going to help them to be kind to my children and my grandchildren. So thank you for the sacrifices you make as moms and the ways that you teach your kids to be good humans. I think it's so important to help kids understand their voice and that give them that power to know that they have something important to say and that you support them saying that. So if you're interested in having your child become a member of one of our weekly clubs called Speak Kaboom, or our Speak Tank Collaborative, where kids can develop their own podcast, or our Pro Speak and Influencer stage, where our kids are actually developing their keynote speeches and delivering them on stages around the world, you can contact me at contact me at director@speakfeedlead.org. That's my email address. But you can find all about our programs at speakfeedlead.org. And that is a nonprofit. So when you purchase memberships from us, it's 100% tax deductible benefit for you. So
only a bonus, right?
Absolutely.
Just want to thank everyone for joining us today, and just work on let's get our authentic voices out there as much as we can, and helping each other and supporting our kids in doing the same. Thank you all for joining us today for an episode of the Mama Genius Hub podcast. We'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.